Hello and welcome to the State of the Fleet Industry, a weekly video series produced by Automotive Fleet magazine. I'm Mike Antich, editor of Automotive Fleet, and today I'd like to examine what's occurring in the commercial fleet market for the week of September 14th, 2020. And I'd like to start our discussion by examining what we're hearing anecdotally from fleet managers and fleet suppliers as to when they anticipate that their businesses will return to pre-pandemic levels of business activity. And to reinforce this anecdotal information we're receiving, we've also rushed a new industry pulse survey, and its preliminary results just arrived this weekend and was tabulated by a great research manager we have, Larry Druth, who worked Sunday to put this together. And that's what I'll be reporting on to you today. And this is a survey that's based on responses from 131 commercial fleet managers. Results are still coming in. We'll give you the final report next week. But so far, the feedback that we've gotten from this survey in conjunction with the anecdotal conversations that we're having is it's really a case of good news and bad news. So let's be optimistic. Let's examine the good news first. And the good news is that when you examine this data, it appears that those companies that were anticipating recovery by year-end 2020 has actually accelerated. There are now 23% of commercial fleets in the industry that have said that their businesses have fully recovered to pre-pandemic levels. And in addition, based on this pulse survey, another 7% anticipate their businesses returning to pre-pandemic levels before the end of calendar year 2020. So this is exciting, and the reason it's exciting when you compare it to a survey that we did just 30 days earlier. At that time, 17% of the fleet managers said their businesses have returned to normal. So that's been a big jump from 17% to now 23% saying they're at normal levels. So when you look at those that anticipate their businesses returning to normal levels by the end of calendar year 2020, that represents about a third of the total industry. So this is the good news. And to summarize it, fleets now are starting to experience a more accelerated recovery from this economic shutdown. And the key qualifier there is some fleets. So the bad news. In the past 30 days, the number of fleets reporting that their recovery will go beyond the 2021 calendar year has almost doubled. Today, about 14% of commercial fleets say that they will not return to pre-pandemic levels of business activity until sometime in calendar year 2022. And this compares to 30 days earlier when only 8% of the fleets said that it would take until 2022 to reach pre-pandemic business activities. So in addition, the number of fleets that are reporting that it's still unknown as to when they'll return, that has been decreasing since our last survey, but still nonetheless, as of today, that still represents 23% of the fleets in our industry. So on the one hand, we see 1/3 of fleet businesses have accelerated their recovery mode, while on the other hand, we see a smaller but increasingly larger group of businesses pushing back recovery until sometime in the 2022 calendar year. So the one point that everybody seems to agree upon is that it will take an effective vaccine in order for us to fully return to normal personal and business lives as they existed prior to February 2020. And there's a current rush that's going on in the global pharmaceutical industry to develop these vaccines, and there's 4 or 5 of them that are showing very promising results. And it's just a remarkable job that's occurring based on my readings and following these developments in the media. But the question is, when will these vaccines become available? And the development is happening quicker than we anticipated, at least according to traditional standards. And there's a hope now that maybe 1 or more of these vaccines might become available by December or early 2021. So just last Friday, September 11th, Dr. Anthony Fauci was interviewed. I believe it was by Reuters. That's been picked up by a number of other news organizations around the world. And in his interview, his prediction was that he anticipates that it won't be until the first several months of 2021 before a vaccine becomes widely available. And that's the operating word, widely available. You wish it'd be sooner, but what he does say does make some sense. I'm confident that we will get some sort of a vaccine available by prior to year end 2020, but the question is when it's going to become widely available. And the U.S. government's adopted a very innovative approach and strategic approach to this. It's a bit of a gamble. We've actually ordered dosages in advance of these vaccines being proved viable. So it's a gamble, but the gamble is that if they are proven viable, we will have already the manufacturing in the works for these dosages to be readily available. And from what I've read, the anticipation is that we should have 10 million doses available by the turn of the year. But it will take several months after that, as we enter into the 2021 year, to develop a sufficient stockpile for the country. And that's one of our disadvantages, is we're a very large country. There are 328 million people, and we're talking about having 10 million doses available by the start of the 2021 calendar year. So that's a remarkable number, but it's hardly a dent when you're talking about a population of 328 million people. And the other big unknown is whether there's going to be more than one dosage required. The hope is that it will take one dosage, but there may be multiple dosages, which then would eat into that stockpile or require greater time to build up a stockpile to service a population as large as that in the U.S. So during the course of a given workday, I spent a lot of time talking with fleet managers and fleet suppliers, and invariably a lot of this discussion and communication is one-on-one phone calls, but increasingly more of this communication now is part of group Zoom meetings, and as we're all congregating, waiting for the actual meeting to start, there's a lot of casual chit-chat conversation that's going on, and one of the common topics of conversation is back to work protocols. People are curious as to when others are going to be going back to work in an office setting, how that compares with their own particular situation. But there is a certain level of consistency, and one of the areas of consistency is that it appears that management is not in any big rush on bringing people back to work in an office setting. And the reason for that is, based on this past 6 months, they have not really noticed any sort of serious degradation in terms of productivity as people work remotely from home. But there are other areas of consistency. Most people were reporting that management has signaled that when they do go back to work, it's strictly going to be on a voluntary basis. Employees will be deciding whether they wish to return to an office setting or whether they'd like to continue working from a home environment. And of course, there are going to be certain essential workers that are going to be required to come into the office environment. Another area that's consistent from a lot of among a lot of different fleet managers is that their management has signaled that when they do return to work, it's going to be in stages. And those people that are back at work are going to be required to stay in their particular work area, or as some companies refer to it, communities or neighborhoods. Employees are not going to be allowed to roam through the building. There will be group meetings that are going to be allowed. However, employees are going to have to schedule these meetings in advance. Most people do not anticipate a lifting of any sort of travel restrictions, except for those that are really mission critical travel. With many companies still in a cash conservation mode, this decrease in travel expenses has represented a pretty substantial amount of saved money that's being reallocated for other purposes. Another area that I wasn't anticipating, but I'm hearing more of, is there are concerns on the part of companies about the mental well-being of employees that are being forced to work remotely, and also concerns about burnout. What comes out of some of these conversations is that HR managers are now having to force people to take vacations, to take time off. They're reporting that there's been huge decreases in the amount of sick time taken, and these managers are looking to be proactive and looking to get people to take time off in order to avoid any sort of burnout situation. So with that, that concludes my State of the Industry presentation for the week of September 14th, and I'd like to thank you for listening.